I still remember the afternoon. I walked through my front door and found Patricia Belmont, our ever self-important HOA president, crouched in the middle of my living room with a tote bag stuffed full of my own belongings. She was muttering about proper color coordination while rummaging through my bookshelf like she was reorganizing a showroom instead of burglarizing a home. What she didn't know, what she couldn't have known, was that 3 hidden cameras were capturing every bizarre second. 2 hours later, I watched from behind my front window as police officers escorted her across my lawn in handcuffs, her perfectly pressed blazer creased and rumpled from the metal restraints. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me back up and explain how the most controlling woman in Maple Grove Estates finally met the one person she couldn't intimidate. When I bought my place on Sycamore Lane 3 years ago, I truly believed I'd found the ideal neighborhood. Tree-lined streets, tidy lawns, and neighbors who actually waved instead of staring at their shoes. The HOA rules were nothing unusual: basic limits on lawn height, acceptable paint colors, and those seasonal decoration deadlines that every homeowners association seems obsessed with. I'm a naturally detail-oriented guy, so sticking to the guidelines was easy. My grass stayed trimmed to exactly 2.5 inches. My mailbox matched the approved shade called forest green. I even made sure to remove every holiday light by January 2nd, as specifically listed in Section 12.4 of the Homeowner's Handbook. For months, everything was smooth. Then everything changed. Patricia Belmont was elected HOA president 18 months ago, and from that moment, the world flipped upside down. Patricia was a real estate agent in her early 50s, with an inflated sense of authority and a personality sharp enough to cut glass. She treated the neighborhood like her personal fiefdom. Within weeks, she began issuing violation notices for things that weren't remotely part of the rules. My neighbor got written up because his doormat was excessively whimsical. Another family received a citation for owning overly cheerful garden gnomes. Patricia would march up and down the streets twice a day, clipboard tucked under her arm like a weapon, hunting for imaginary infractions. My first real taste of her dictatorship came on a chilly Tuesday morning in March. I was outside sipping coffee on my porch when Patricia stormed up my driveway, her heels clacking against the pavement with drill sergeant intensity. "Mr. Davidson," she announced, using a tone usually reserved for war crimes, "we need to talk about your window treatments." I glanced over at my windows, confused. I had plain white blinds, nothing flashy at all. "They're creating an asymmetrical appearance from the street," she continued, gesturing dramatically with her clipboard. "The slats on your living room blinds are angled differently from the ones in your bedroom." At first, I honestly thought she was joking, but when I realized she wasn't, I tried to reason with her. "Patricia, there's nothing in the HOA rules about blind angles. I've read the entire document twice." Her face went tomato red, and she jabbed her pen toward me like she was about to write a citation directly on my forehead. "The guidelines clearly state that homes must maintain a harmonious appearance. Your blinds are disrupting the visual flow of the entire block." That was the moment I knew Patricia wasn't just strict, she had lost touch with reality. Over the next few months, the violations escalated. I received a warning claiming my porch had excessive decorative elements, referring to a tiny wind chime my daughter made in art class. My flower pots, plain terracotta pots identical to half the ones on the street, were suddenly inconsistent with neighborhood aesthetics. Every notice came with bolder threats of fines, and Patricia began loitering on the sidewalk in front of my home, snapping photos and scribbling notes on her beloved clipboard. The turning point came in early June, when little things around my home started changing. One morning, a wind chime vanished entirely. A week later, I came home to find my flower pots rearranged in what Patricia must have considered a more appropriate layout. Decorative stones I'd placed around my garden bed were mysteriously gone. At first, I chalked it up to my imagination. Who really suspects their HOA president of breaking and entering? But then I found a note taped to my back window. That read, "This frosted glass is not approved," written unmistakably in Patricia's sharp handwriting. That was when I knew it wasn't paranoia someone was coming onto my property. I mentioned my suspicions to my neighbor, Robert Kessler, who lived 2 houses down. His eyes widened, and he leaned in close. "You too?" he whispered. I thought I was losing it. "Last month, my wife's garden flamingo disappeared, and we found it in our trash can 3 days later. Our gate was locked. Someone climbed over or picked the lock." Hearing that confirmed everything I feared. Patricia wasn't just sending hostile letters, she was trespassing. Installing security cameras became a no-brainer. The day after talking with Robert, I ordered high-definition cameras with motion detection and night vision. I hid one in my living room, disguised as a decorative vase on the bookshelf. Another went into the kitchen disguised as a smoke detector. The third I mounted under the eave outside, where it captured both my front and back doors. All were connected to cloud storage so the footage would be saved instantly. For 2 weeks, nothing happened. I began to wonder if maybe Patricia had backed off or at least found a new victim. Then June 23rd arrived. I was in a client meeting downtown when my phone buzzed with a motion alert. I dismissed it, assuming it was a delivery guy or maybe the neighbor's cat. But then another alert came, and another. By the 5th alert, I quietly stepped out of the meeting and opened the live feed on my phone. My stomach dropped. There was Patricia wearing dark sunglasses and her hair pulled back into a tight bun, looking like some deranged suburban spy cutting through my back gate with bolt cutters. After breaking the lock, she crept into my backyard, walked straight to my kitchen window, and pulled a thin piece of metal from her pocket. She jimmied the latch with practiced ease. Within minutes, she had the window open and was climbing into my home. I didn't hesitate. I dialed 911 immediately. My hands were shaking as I tried to explain everything to the dispatcher. "Someone is breaking into my house right now. I'm watching it on my security camera. It's the HOA president from my neighborhood." I could practically hear the dispatcher's confusion through the line, probably wondering why on earth an HOA president would be committing a burglary. But when I stressed that this was happening live, she immediately dispatched officers to my address. As I sped home, I kept the camera feed open on my phone. Patricia wandered through my house with the casual entitlement of someone browsing an estate sale. She opened drawers, cabinets, and bins with unbothered confidence. She had brought a huge tote bag embroidered with Maple Grove HOA, and she began loading it with whatever she decided counted as violations. My daughter's wind chime was the first to disappear into the bag. Then she grabbed the decorative cushions from my couch, because they were apparently the wrong shade of beige. She even plucked a small succulent from my kitchen windowsill, scowling at it before tossing it in as it had personally offended her. What made the whole thing even more surreal was the way she documented everything. She pulled out her phone and took photos of each item before confiscating it, pausing now and then to type what I assumed were notes bitching about the violations. At one point, she actually sat down at my dining table, grabbed my pen, and filled out a stack of violation notices, which she neatly arranged on my coffee table like she was staging a crime scene. She was literally creating paperwork to justify stealing from me. I reached my street just as 2 police cruisers rolled up to my driveway. Officers Davis and Chen stepped out, and at first, they looked skeptical when I breathlessly explained that the HOA president was, at this very moment, inside my house, stealing my decorations. But skepticism quickly turned into shocked understanding when I showed them the live feed on my phone. "Sir, stay in your car while we handle this," Officer Davis instructed, reaching instinctively for his radio. "This is an active burglary. We don't know if the suspect is armed or dangerous." I stayed put and watched from inside my car as both officers approached my front porch. Meanwhile, on my phone screen, Patricia was still inside, scrutinizing my bookshelf with a look of pure condescension. The officers knocked loudly, announcing themselves. The look on Patricia's face when she heard police was something I'll treasure forever. She froze mid-reach, possibly grabbing a photo album, her eyes going wide as she just realized she wasn't in a dream. For a split second, I thought she might try to hide, but then that familiar arrogance took over. She straightened her blazer, snatched up her tote bag full of stolen items, and marched to the front door with the phony poise of someone about to host a charity brunch. "Officers, I can explain," she said, slipping into her most authoritative tone as she opened the door. "I'm the HOA president, and I have full authority to inspect properties for violations. Mr. Davidson has been blatantly disregarding our community standards, and I was simply documenting the infractions." Officer Chen's eyebrow shot up. "Ma'am, are you admitting that you entered this residence without permission?" Patricia's certainty flickered. "I didn't break in. I used my authority as HOA president to conduct a necessary inspection." What happened next felt like watching a courtroom drama unfold on my lawn. Officer Davis asked Patricia to step outside, which she did while clutching her overflowing tote bag as if it were evidence of righteousness instead of theft. When he asked her to show them what was inside, she scoffed, but handed it over. Out came my daughter's wind chime, my cushions, my succulent, even a little wooden sign from my hallway that said, "Home Sweet Home." She had taken that too. "These are all HOA violations," she declared confidently, as though she'd solved a grand mystery. "I removed them for the good of the neighborhood." Meanwhile, Officer Chen pulled me aside. "Sir, let me confirm some details. This woman does not reside here, correct?" I confirmed she didn't. "And you did not give her permission to enter?" I shook my head firmly. "Does she have a key?" Another no. "So she forced her way through your gate and broke in through the window." I played the footage for him, and his expression hardened instantly. "Sir, this is breaking and entering, burglary, and property damage. We'll need full copies of the footage for our report." Then came the moment I'll never forget. Officer Davis informed Patricia that she was under arrest. Her face cycled through 3 different shades: red, white, then a kind of blotchy purple. "You can't arrest me," she screeched, her voice rising with pure panic. "I'm the HOA president. I was doing my job." "This is absolutely ridiculous." But Officer Davis was already pulling out the handcuffs. "Ma'am, turn around and place your hands behind your back." Seeing Patricia Belmont, the tyrant of Maple Grove Estates, being handcuffed in my yard while my neighbors peeked through their blinds was immensely satisfying. As they escorted her toward the squad car, she continued shrieking about property values and community harmony. "You don't understand," she yelled at me over her shoulder. "Your blinds, your decorations, they're ruining the entire aesthetic of this block." And all I could think was, she really believed that. Officer Chen assured me they'd need a full statement and copies of all my security footage, which I provided without hesitation. By then, several neighbors had wandered outside, standing in stunned silence as their once untouchable HOA president was driven away in the back of a police cruiser. The news spread through Maple Grove Estates faster than gossip at a barbecue. Within hours, my phone was buzzing. Non-stop neighbors calling to share their own Patricia horror stories. Robert Kessler admitted he'd installed cameras after the Garden Flamingo incident and even had footage of Patricia sneaking into his backyard. The Johnsons on Oak Street revealed that she'd walked into their garage and rearranged their tools because they weren't stored symmetrically. And gentle old Mrs. Patterson finally confessed that Patricia had let herself into her home under the guise of checking for safety hazards but had actually taken pieces from her prized ceramic cat collection. By the next morning, the local news had scooped up the story. HOA president arrested for breaking into homes made for a sensational headline, especially once reporters got hold of the security footage. The clip of Patricia climbing through my window with her HOA tote bag went viral almost instantly. Someone even turned her mugshot into a meme with the caption, "When you take your job way too seriously." The media attention emboldened even more victims to come forward, creating a tidal wave of evidence against her. The emergency HOA meeting 3 days later was so packed that people were standing shoulder to shoulder. The remaining board members, faces red with embarrassment, struggled to maintain order as furious homeowners demanded answers. How long had Patricia been entering homes? Had the board known? Who gave her the authority to rewrite rules that didn't exist? The meeting descended into chaos when someone suggested reviewing the HOA's financial records, and the bombshell dropped. Patricia had been using association funds to buy bolt cutters, lockpicking tools, and other equipment for her illegal inspections. Patricia's arraignment was set for the following Monday. She arrived wearing the same blazer she'd worn during the break-in, accompanied by an attorney who looked like he charged by the minute. The charges were extensive: 15 counts of breaking and entering, 15 counts of burglary, 1 count of property destruction from my gate, and misappropriation of HOA funds. Prosecutor Janet Hong, a no-nonsense, razor-sharp woman, presented the security footage and testimony from a parade of homeowners. Patricia's lawyer tried to argue she believed she had implied consent due to her role as HOA president, but Judge Morrison shut that down immediately. "Miss Belmont," the judge said, his voice stern and unwavering, "being HOA president does not give you the right to enter people's homes. It does not give you the right to remove their property, and it certainly does not entitle you to use association funds for criminal acts." Patricia tried to speak, but her attorney quickly placed a hand on her arm to silence her. "The evidence against you," the judge continued, "is overwhelming. You admitted to entering homes. You were recorded on camera, and you left behind violation notices documenting your own crimes. Your actions represent a disturbing pattern of abuse." Though the trial date was set for September, Patricia's life unraveled almost immediately. The State Real Estate Commission suspended her license pending the outcome of the criminal case. Her brokerage fired her within hours, unwilling to be associated with a realtor who broke into clients' houses. The HOA board held another emergency vote, removed her from her position, and began reviewing every violation she'd issued. Most were tossed out as nonsense, and several homeowners started preparing civil lawsuits for harassment and emotional distress. As September drew near, Patricia's attorney reached out about a plea deal. The evidence was so damning that going to trial would almost certainly mean maximum sentences on every charge. Prosecutor Hong offered a deal: plead guilty to 5 counts of breaking and 1 count of misappropriation of funds, serve 18 months in minimum security prison, pay full restitution to all victims, and complete 300 hours of community service. Patricia initially refused, still convinced she'd been doing her duty, but her lawyer eventually convinced her that facing 15 burglary charges could land her in prison for decades. The day Patricia Belmont stood before Judge Morrison to enter her guilty plea, the courtroom was filled with Maple Grove residents. Patricia looked smaller than I'd ever seen her, shoulders hunched, eyes glued to the floor. Her usual authoritarian posture gone. As part of the plea, she had to articulate her crimes aloud. "I entered homes without permission," she murmured, barely above a whisper. "I took property that wasn't mine. I used HOA funds for personal purposes." Each admission seemed to physically drain her, as though confessing was somehow more painful than the punishment itself. Judge Morrison accepted the plea, but delivered a final, sharp reprimand. "Miss Belmont, you violated the most fundamental trust of a community. Neighbors should feel safe in their homes, safe from strangers, and especially safe from those in positions of authority. You abused your power in a way that damaged this neighborhood profoundly." The sentence of 18 months incarceration, $30,000 in restitution, and 300 hours of community service reflects the seriousness of your crimes. As he read the sentence, Patricia's face crumpled. The reality of losing her freedom for a year and a half hit her with brutal clarity. She slowly turned toward the gallery filled with her former neighbors, perhaps hoping for a sympathetic face, but found only stern expressions and tightly crossed arms. When the bailiff stepped forward to escort her into custody, Patricia finally broke down in tears. Her carefully styled hair fell loose as she shook her head, sobbing in disbelief. The woman who had terrorized Maple Grove Estates for 18 months was led away in handcuffs, finally forced to face the consequences of her obsessive need for control.